I just realized that we've been neglecting Jessica. So I'm going to put up story 4, and it's called Paper Hats. Not all of Jessica's adventures were situations where she found herself in some sort of trouble. Oh no, not at all. There were very quiet times for her too. But one thing Jessica never suffered from, and that was boredom. No matter what activity was planned for the day, she always found it exciting. It was exciting to live close to nature. There was so many things to learn, and because of some of her brushes with its darker side, she enjoyed its beauty and abundance even more. If the day did not have its hours filled with plans by her mother or father, Jessica would wander the fields, but there were times when she just enjoyed the wonders in and around the yard and farm buildings. She would lie in the cool grass of the yard and watch the fluffy white clouds drift by in the deep blue of the sky overhead. She then would close her eyes and listen to all the sounds made by nature's children, and mixed in with the songs of the birds and the chirping of the crickets, Jessica would hear the sounds of the farm animals. But there were days when there was no time for Jessica to daydream. She had her chores to do. During the summer days, one of those chores was to help her mother pick the wild strawberries that grew in the back field. Jessica did not mind having to do that, but she did not like being in the hot July sun. She never complained, however, because the sweet taste of the big juicy strawberries more than made up for the discomfort, and she did enjoy very much being with her mother, for it seemed that in the berry patch her mother forgot that she was only 5 years old and talked to her of making jam and other good things to eat. It made Jessica feel all grown up. It was on such a day of berry picking that Jessica learned how to make a paper hat to protect her from the sun's rays. They had left the house at 8, and at noon returned with 6 two-pound pails filled with the fruit of their morning's work. Her mother made lunch of thick slices of homemade bread spread with butter and dishes of strawberries swimming in rich, fresh cream. After lunch, Jessica dried the dishes for her mother, then went out into the yard to watch the butterflies. There were a lot of butterflies feeding in the dried-up mud puddles in the barnyard. But as she watched them, her mother's call came to her from the kitchen doorway. "Jessica, it's time to go back to the berry patch." Jessica left the butterflies and ran to catch up to her mother, who was already heading down the pathway leading to the back field. She saw that her mother was carrying 6 pails and also something that looked like a roll of her father's weekly newspaper. And with her nature so true to finding out answers to things that intrigued her, she asked, "What are you going to do with the paper, Mama?" Her mother looked down at her. "I have a little surprise for you. You will like it." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She loved surprises. She reached out and took 2 of the pails that was about to fall from her mother's overfilled hands. She skipped across the brook which they had come to, splashing its cool wetness over her feet and legs. She was already feeling hot, and its coolness made a little chill run over her body. As she reached the closed pole gate that kept the animals from going and eating the ripening hay, she looked back to see where her mother was. Jessica opened the gate just enough to pass through and waited for her mother to catch up. The sun beat down on her, its heat soon drying her feet legs and the wet hem of her light summer dress. After her mother passed through the opening, Jessica pushed the gate closed. She slipped the wire loop that locked it over the holding spike in the large picket that anchored the wire fencing which kept the animals out of the hayfields. Soon they reached the back field where the wild strawberries grew. This part of the farm was not planted in crops. Her father left it in its wild state, and from it each year they harvest many pounds of fruit. The strawberry patches were at the end of a much larger field of hay, and once you were there you could not see the buildings because of the rise in the land. It rose from the marshland where the brook flowed, forming come on. I should have this stapled together. Forming a hill this hill hid them from being seen by anyone in the farming community. If Jessica wanted to see the farm buildings, she had to walk up this rather steep hill. From there she could see her own home and several other houses with their surrounding buildings. They sat to work. When Jessica had picked all the berries in the small patch she had found, she walked further down the hill looking for more. She looked around to see that her mother was doing something with the roll of newspaper she had brought along. And just as she was about to go to see what her mother was doing, she found a patch of berries that had the biggest fruit she had ever seen. The ground was red instead of green with the abundance of them. Excitement rose in her like a tide, and she called, "Mama, Mama, come over here, quick!" Her mother looked up from what she was doing. "What is it, Jessica? Can't you see I'm trying to do something here?" Jessica was so excited now that she was hopping from foot to foot like a dancer on a stage. She could not believe that so many berries would be in one place, and they were so big. She dropped to her knees and began to pick the biggest ones near her. Again she called, "Mama, there are millions of big berries." Jessica kept picking, and her relief was deep when she looked up and saw her mother walking towards her. She smiled happily when her mother's inhaled a short breath of surprise and said, "Jessica, Jessica, you are the best berry finder. We will have our pails full in no time. Here, let me make you a hat to shade you from the sun while we pick these beautiful big berries." And with that she sat on the ground and began to make a hat with the newspaper she had brought along. Jessica stopped her picking and sat back on her heels to watch. The paper lay flat on the ground. Her mother folded it to make 2 sheets. Then she folded the ends over like small triangles. Then she folded the edges of each page back and over them. And when she opened the pages, there was a 2-pointed hat. She got up and came over and put it on Jessica's head. The long point in the front hid her face from the sun, and the point in the back kept her back cool. It was a perfect hat. Kayla looked up at looked up at her mother. "Thank you, Mama," her mother smiled. Her dark brown eyes sparkled down at Jessica. She did not speak, for there was no need to. She knelt on the ground near Jessica and put on her own paper hat. Then she began to pick the big red berries. In no time at all, they filled all of the pails. Jessica sat back on her haunches to rest her knees. Her mother did the same. Jessica could see that her mother was very reluctant to leave so much fruit unpicked. They would not last long in the hot weather, but they had no more pails to fill. Then Jessica took the paper hat from her head and began to fill it. Her mother's voice, sounding a little annoyed, suddenly faded into silence. Jessica, don't take off your... In a few seconds, the sound of berries being dropped into a paper hat reached Jessica. She looked up to where her mother was. Her eyes met, and her mother's smile of approval made big berries Jessica had popped into her mouth taste even better. The berry patch was soon all picked clean. It was time to go home with their afternoon's harvest. Jessica followed her mother up the hill and down to the brook. They did not bother to use the stepping stones. They just walked into the water and let it cool them off. When they got home, the berries were put on the scales. They had picked 37 pounds. Jessica almost burst with pride when her mother told the family at the supper table that they had enough berries to make jams and jellies to last all winter, and it was because Jessica had taught to use the paper hats as extra pails to hold all of the berries. The end.